Am I live? Am I live? Am I live? I think I'm live. All right, looks like I'm live. Cool, 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 cool. Awesome, 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 awesome. Oh, you got spooked by this? Hey, Elliot, good to see you. I'm sorry you got spooked by it. You're fresh out of the shower, Elliot? Well, it's good to see you. It's good to see you. Good to see you. Alrighty. Okay. Alrighty. Oh, kid, tell me what you're working on. Hey, no problem, Elliot. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. I make sure everything's doing good. Okay, looks like everything's functioning so far. Okay. Okay, gotta close this. Okay. Let me get ready to get started. Get my notes. Oop. Cool. Cool. Okay. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I just ate something a little bit before I started, and it's just stomach being. Blah, 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 blah. Let me check my. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah. Trying to get the energy to get moving and make sure I'm working on my posture so I don't pull something. Okay, let's tab back in here. Okay, so let's scroll up and look what's going on in the chat. I do see you change fonts, Elliot. New sketchbook, new things. I've seen some of your community posts, Elliot. I've been liking them. Went to zoo. Someone tried to rescue. Oh my gosh. Turn Sharpedo. Oh, nice. Oh my gosh. SATs, that brings back so many memories. I think you've mentioned some of that personal drama. Let me get to the just chatting screen. Yay, my model's here. Cool, I haven't seen that in a minute. Okay. So I have been reading a lot of like manga lately. I say a lot, but I've been reading just some manga lately, I guess. And I like it's led to like some interesting like thoughts and ideas and giving me like kicking off different ideas in my head. And I've been like kicking around different story ideas, and I've actually been on kind of a fantasy kick of kind of doing some like fantasy storytelling stuff. Play stream elements posting. What? Oh geez, that sounds rough, Elliot. So I've been working on, and I had some ideas for like kind of the basis of a magic system for a world, and then I was thinking about different story ideas that I could set in that world, and I've been bouncing around a lot of different ideas, and I've been kind of like kicking around different settings or ways to apply that magic system, and it's led to some interesting places. And that's been really cool. And definitely reading some interesting manga. And I've been reading some manhwa lately and some like webtoon stuff. I don't know if there's a difference between manhwas and webtoons, but they're definitely interesting. And it's really funny. Like there were a few times where I sat down to play Monster Hunter. Oh, an enigmatic counter. Okay. Oh, well, it can be hard finding inspiration. I definitely know what that's like. But yeah, there have been a few times this past week, actually, where like I sat down to play Monster Hunter, and I'm like, okay, I have this idea for a story thing. I'm gonna jot this down real quick before I boot up the game. And then like when I start jotting down ideas, other ideas start coming, stuff starts flowing. And the next thing I know, it's like 7 hours later. I haven't eaten or drinking anything. I'm tired. I'm hungry, and I never actually booted up Monster Hunter because I've just been writing. No, I haven't seen your stream playlist, Elliot. I have not actually. And I've been kind of thinking about trying to come back to like reading some more like mecha and sci-fi manga again. But like it's kind of hard for me to find a lot of the stuff that kind of like suits some of my sensibilities and some of the things that I really want to find in manga. And like I very much get frustrated with super OP protagonists, because I feel like it kind of takes me, like, I understand the power fantasy, right? I get the power fantasy, but like I just feel like it pulls me out of it if like the protagonist can like BS plot armor their way through stuff, right? And like I like stuff where you see the protagonist like growing and developing, and like you see the thought process and how they get to certain things. And like not really femboys or gay panic, Elliot. Like I see a lot of like OP protagonists where just like the fights don't have any real stakes, or like the fights just get like things escalate to ridiculous levels really, really quickly. Just like because of these ever rising stakes, in order to make any kind of threat, right? And it just gets really ridiculous really fast. And like, I don't know, like I look back at some of the stories I've written or worked on, and I'm like, I really would like a story that was like, you know, about someone who was, maybe not underpowered, but like someone who like had limited capabilities and had to like use strategy, had to think. And it's like, what was that anime? I'll Noah Zero. I liked Al Noah Zero. I liked a lot of stuff. I liked a lot of the concepts. I liked the mech. I liked a lot of the things in it. But the problem was like the main character in Al Noah Zero, just completely had like no personality, and like the leaps in logic they were taking were just like absolutely ridiculous. See, that when you're talking about like continental destruction level, I would not like I get frustrated when characters are like at that kind of power scale, at least the main character, right? I would like, I guess if you're talking about power scaling, maybe not street level, but like maybe like city level, heroes that have to like or characters that have to find a way to deal with like nation or continent level threats. And where you see them struggling and having to like step up and work together with others and gather resources and make preparations and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's just like, you know. But I've been working on like ideas for a magic system. And that's led to some interesting stuff. I also like really simple designs. I don't like the really over-designed, bizarre-looking, mechs that have like really lots of weird protrusions and odd things coming out of them in weird places and all that kind of stuff. I really like very simple, almost like mass-produced looking designs when it comes to mech. And like when it comes to like heroes, I like very like simplistic costumes or power armor that just like looks very like very, I don't know if realistic's the right word, but just very simple. Is a lot of what I like. Like I really like a lot of like the basic concept of like Space Marines power armor. Because like Space Marines power armor just looks like at its base without all of the seals and weird add-ons and stuff, it's just like relatively simple, you know what I mean? Like okay, let me find. I mean, the proportions are bizarre, but like, but like, it's big, it's bulky. Though I think, Elliot, you might appreciate the magic system that I've been working on. Let me bring it up. Bring out my notes so I can share it with you all. So it's been an interesting, like, kind of journey working on, like, coming up with ideas for this magic system. It's been interesting. Putting that together. Why is my... Hold on. Sorry, my Twitch dashboard was like not displaying properly, and I was like, what in the world's happening? Why is this being weird? Why is this being bizarre? And is this working? Is this working? Okay, cool. Seems like it's working. Which is good, because my internet's been like acting up all week. Actually, speaking of which, let me do something real quick, because I just remembered something I have to do. Hey, Nabiru! I am so glad you're here. Nabiru, I have a question for you specifically. I was going to give it to Silva to give to you or send to you or somehow get to you, but since you're here, I can ask you, Nabiru. So I'm very glad that you are here. Hold on one second. So I am looking for manga or manhwa or webtoon suggestions. Well, I don't know if manhwa and webtoons are the same thing. I've seen them used interchangeably, but anyway, I'm not going there. Not going into that conversation. I have been doing a lot of I've been reading a lot of fantasy recently, and I've been kind of wanting to get back into the kind of mecha genre. And I was looking for suggestions for mecha that aren't like, you know, Gundam, Getter Robo, Mazinger, and just like mecha anime, and I guess specifically like I'm looking for ones where it's like the protagonist isn't like super OP, like mecha or sci-fi stuff where like the protagonist isn't like super OP stuff, where like the protagonist is actually like intelligent and like not the most powerful person in the world. You know, like ideally I would like a story that was like protagonist is like piloting a mass-produced grunt mech. But sounds like you've got a whole lot of stuff developed for your self-insert character, Elliot. Okay. Where is the button? Note. That is not the button I want. Whoop. Okay, here we go. I guess. Like, but you know what I mean? Where it's like when you get some anime where like the main character just like, it's just like extreme power fantasy and yeah. Okay, so this is a magic system that I was working on for a fantasy story, and I have some different ideas for it. And so when I was working on this idea, right? Okay, all right, take your time, Nabiru, take your time. And I was like, okay, so I want to like approach this from kind of a science-y kind of perspective, right? So I was like, okay, so we've got the what I want to call the magical energy, right? And I've always heard mana or like arcane energy or stuff and stuff like that. And I was like, well, let's do some research, right? So I did some research on like different names for magical energy, and I found this post that was like, that's a bunch of powers, Elliot. Not that I'm knocking it. I'm just like, yeah, that's a bunch of stuff. And I found this post that was like, let's make a list. It was like a forum thing where there were like people were like, hey everybody, let's make a list of names for magical energy that are not cultural appropriation. And I was like, you know. And when I read on that, it was talking about how the default name has been mana for so long because Magic the Gathering and other things that talk about mana. And the word mana actually is an actual word that is related to a spirituality that is connected to Pacific Islander culture. And it doesn't actually mean the stuff that we use it for. It usually means the stuff about like your ability to like motivate people or something. They were going into it like what it actually means, and that it in its popular use, that's not how it's being used. And so people were discussing different things about different terms to use for magical energy. The posts kind of went a little bit sideways when people started arguing about culture stuff and what cultures were okay to borrow from for fiction and which ones weren't, and it was a whole thing with that. And I've realized that like it's kind of funny that I've been on this progression with my writing where before, when I was writing stuff, I would just be like, okay, gonna come up with a story, basic concept. I will insert, yeah, Pacific Islanders mentioned. I will insert, names later, but like, as I've gone on, I've gotten to the point where like the names being the names of characters and things and places have become to mean more and more and more for my storytelling. And that's not to say that like people who add names later are like worse or that I've become any better than anyone else. It's just been my progression of writing, right? And it's become part of the thing about finding the meanings behind the words and then incorporating that into the characterization of what I do. And so when I was looking for this for like some kind of a magical energy, the one that I kind of liked was anima. Anima comes from, I believe it's the Greek word that it's either Greek or Latin, that refers to breath or life, like life-giving breath or breath of life, right? And I was thinking, okay, so if I want that to be my magical energy, how do I use that name, right? How do I use that meaning? So I was like, okay, so what if we take it and say that it is an energy that all living things make by breathing, right? And the assumption is that all living things have to breathe something. The fish breathe something in the water. The people, the birds, and the things on land breathe the air, right? Everything has to breathe something. And then this idea that by breathing, these living things will create anima energy that normally is used to fuel their biological processes, right? And then ars anima, which ars comes from the Latin term for like the art of something. So like ars something is like the art of something. So the practice of like the art of magic. Hey Noelman is taking anima energy and using it to fuel spells, enchantments, or rituals, and basically intentionally using anima energy for something outside of its natural purpose, which is just to run the biological processes in this world, right? And no, Angry Meatball, that actually confused me too. So mana from the Bible is M-A-N-N-A. It's a different mana. And that is not even related to where mana comes from in popular culture for like referring to magic. It's actually directly lifted from some Pacific Islander spirituality. And it's become a thing where like, according to, I haven't done a whole lot of research on it, but according to like the posts on it, like the people of that spirituality don't like that how it's been kind of co-opted by popular culture because it's a misuse of the word. But it's become so widespread that trying to make people stop using it is just an exercise in futility at this point. But yeah, it's interesting. A little sad how that happened, but like when you look at like a lot of like fiction and stuff, a lot of times fiction is inspired by, you know, real history, real mythology, and it doesn't involve a lot of times taking, and I hate to use this word, but you know, bastardizing different terminology and concepts. I mean that in like the most, I guess, almost literal sense of the word, where like the term like bastardizing refers to cutting something off from its parentage, being cut off from its parentage, and that's what happens here, where it becomes separated from what it originally comes from. It's all right, Elliot. It's your story. You can make it as crazy as you want. But yeah, so in this like setting I'm working on, the energy's anima energy, and but what I thought was funny was I was like, okay, what do I call the mages, right? Because it's gonna be a thing like to the common person, it's mages, magic, magecraft, right? But to the practitioners, it is anima, right? And they don't, and I'm thinking of this idea of like, okay, they don't like being called mages or being referred to as magic or magecraft, because that implies that they're making something from nothing, that it's all like miracles and stuff. But for them, it's like almost a combination of science and art, something they study and practice and train at on a regular basis. Oh, all right. First ban in a while. All right, so we are going to where's the button? That the button I wanted to press. Let's see. Yep. Okay. Great. Cool. I haven't had a bot in a while. So, yeah, that one who just came in, Ario, was like, hey, hit me up on Discord. Let's get your models and visuals up to make your stream even more amazing. And I'm like, oh, great. All right, cool, ban. Yeah, had a bot pop in. It be that way sometimes, you know? So I was like, okay, so what do I want to call this? So I was like, okay, so there's someone who uses anima energy. So I was like, hey, let's call them animators, right? Because it's anima, animator. And then I'm like, okay, so they're going to be that they're breathing life into their spells, like an animator breathes life into their art stuff, right? And I was like, and then I was like, you know what, let me look up the root of the word animator, right? And it turns out, animators, the word animator has its root in the term anima. And it literally means like what I said, where like they're breathing life into the still images. And that's interesting, Elliot. And so I was like, okay, let me run with this, right? And then I just thought the more I thought about it, the more funny it was, right? That it was like, okay, so the mages are called animators, right? And then their spells would be called animations, right? And I was just like, how funny is it that this came together to be like, okay, animators are the mages, animations are their magic, anima energy is their power source, which is generated by breathing. Because it can't be generated by eating or sleeping, because we all know animators do not do that nearly enough for it to be a power source. All right, cool. Thank you, Nabaru. Just don't have them summon undead. I know, it's no problem, Elliot. I got no problem with you sharing your stuff. I'm always up for hearing about what stuff you're working on. No worries, no worries. I also wanted to incorporate some elements because I was kind of like trying to piece in stuff from other things I liked into the setting, and I was working on like doing some stuff with, like, the elements from Dragalia Lost. And trying to like put that into it, and then this idea that like you need. So I've been reading this webcomic, Suitor Armor, which it starts out as this like kind of quirky medieval fantasy story about this woman who's like she's a lady in waiting, or like an ally or servant or helper, I guess, of this princess who's like been prepping for this arranged marriage for a long time, and the main character, who's this handmaid essentially, starts to fall in love with this animated suit of armor that was created by this mage, and it's like trying to teach this suit of armor what it means to be human and understanding emotions and yada yada. And then, like, 108 chapters in, it's it's about bigotry, racism, politics, murder, war, genocide, and the romance thing is still there. But yeah, so one of the things about how they do magic in that story is that people have to, like, humans, when they do magic, they need to have something to consume to get the energy to fuel their magic, right? And so they usually use like flowers. So I was like, okay, so I wanted to incorporate some stuff like that. So I was like, okay, so what if it's like, in order to cast something, you need to pull anima energy from somewhere, right? You need the energy from somewhere. So you're either pulling it from inside of yourself or from something that you're sacrificing. So then if it has to be a living thing that you're sacrificing, it would be like some kind of plant or animal. So then, okay, and I thought it'd be really cool to be like, okay, so larger plants and animals generally have more anima energy, but then I thought it'd be really kind of funny to be that for some reason flowers have a disproportionately large amount of anima energy for their size. And to create this image of, like, if you come up to a mage's tower, right, you're going to generally see one of two things outside the mage's tower. You are either going to see a very large, very impressive flower garden, or you're going to see a large, like, group of animal pens with lots of animals in it. And, like, that whatever's there is what's being sacrificed for the mage's spells. And I was looking at, like, different types of animation to be the different types of spells. So the main two are 2D and 3D animations. 2D animations are essentially like you draw a ritual circle onto a flat surface that can be extremely detailed and have a lot of different symbols and shapes drawn into the circle, and then you would take whatever the sacrifice is and either put it in the middle or around the outside of the circle to draw the anima energy in to fuel the spell. And then there's 3D animations, which involves the caster using a wand or like some other kind of focus to draw the symbols in the air with, like, energy in the space around them. And that's like they're casting stuff, right? And these can be more complex because it's a 3D matrix of symbols that you're drawing. And but in order to in order to speed it up and simplify it, you can have a focus like a crystal or a wand that is some kind of 3D shape already have the symbols carved into it, right? And then you just fill that shape, you just put animal energy into that shape through either a sacrifice or pulling it from yourself, and then it activates as if you'd drawn the shape yourself. Hey, LeMay! In order to activate the spell. So they can, like, some simple things can be like can be automated. And that becomes like that for that kind of casting, right? Well, I have limitations on the magic items, right? Where in this case, right, the magic, because a part of the rules of the setting, the magic has to be created by breathing, right? And stones don't breathe. Crystals and things and wands don't breathe. So they wouldn't generate their own anima energy. So what you can do is you can inscribe the spell into the object, and then you channel energy through yourself, through a sacrifice, into the item, and then that releases the spell. Or what is another thing is there are some minerals like rocks and stones and crystals, you can put anima energy into them, and for a time they will hold the anima energy, but it will eventually dissipate. And different materials of different like shaping or whatever can hold anima energy for longer periods of time. But like it's going to need to be refilled. It's not going to refill itself. That was my way of dealing with that kind of like cheat thing. And when I got to like some of the races of the world, right? Like one of the races of the world, the Monsans, yeah, they can be you can have a focus, a thing that you use to release anima energy, as part of a spell, or like just to release it at all. So the main, and I wanted to come up with cool names for the things and not just be standard humans, elves, dwarves, you know, that kind of stuff, right? So I wanted to look at like having the names be descriptive of what they are, right? So instead of humans, they're adaptants because they're adaptable. They adapt to their surroundings. I didn't say sans, Elliot. You have sans on the brain. They're adaptants, where they are adaptable. They come up with new things for different situations. They spread quickly. They go in different environments and climates and come up with ways to survive in different environments and climates. And they're all about adapting and learning, and they're humans. They're the humans of the setting, right? And they're the newest intelligent species to organize and develop. Yeah, I know. They're the newest intelligent species to organize and develop. And the thing about them is, whereas everybody else had been like, hey, you want to take your magic slowly, learn carefully, or whatever, the adaptants just threw caution to the wind and experimented with everything really fast, took huge risks, suffered some heavy losses, but made huge breakthroughs and accelerated their understanding of magic, catching up to the other intelligent species in record time. Stereotypical human stuff, right? Then you have the Sylvans, which Sylvan comes from the Latin word for forest, which Silva is one of the Latin words for forest or grove. So these are like my version of like elves in this setting, right? They are, but I wanted to like take some of the tropes about elves and turn them a little bit on their, turn them on their head, right? So it's kind of a combination of elves and fairies. They are a very long-lived species. They can live up to 1,000 years. They usually only live about 800 to 900 years, and an adult will generally be between 4 to 5 feet tall. They have wings that they can use to fly, but not just can they use their wings to fly, they can also breathe through their wings. They can use their wings as another way to breathe in and out. And because they can breathe in so much because of like their normal breathing and just how much they can breathe in through their wings, they generate massive amounts of anima energy, which is part of, I want to say that's actually why they live so long, is because their bodily, they have so much anima energy to fuel their bodily processes. I want to put that down. But this means they have large amounts of anima energy in their bodies, and they were the first ones in this world. Also, the world I'm working on for the design is called Vita, which means life. It has multiple types of intelligent species. It has it's kind of an Earth substitute, different climates, temperatures, or whatever. The general accepted calendar is a 12-month calendar. Each month is exactly 28 days long, which is dictated by the phases of Vita's moon. So it's a 336-day year. And the Sylvans were the first ones to develop magic. They developed the first sets of symbols for harnessing anima energy, and they built their entire society around its study and understanding. And they didn't build, and I also wanted to take some of the ideas of, like, I see in a lot of fiction where they attribute a lot of, like, themes and ideas that we attribute to, like, a lot of, like, indigenous peoples to elves. And I wanted to take that and kind of, like, explore that a little bit, where what I do with the Sylvans, where they don't have organized, fenced-off farms like everybody else does. They don't have areas where they've cut down large amounts of trees to make massive farms, but they live in the forests, and they have very intentionally cultivated certain areas of the forest, so specific things that they need for their community grow in certain areas, so they know where to find them in large enough numbers to feed and supply their community. And they know where the different animals that they need to hunt are going to migrate and going to live, and the territory. And they're very careful about overhunting and this idea of, like, being good stewards of their forests, right? And, like, they're they step in to one of the things they step in is if there's an aberration or some kind of a thing that's happening that is destabilizing this very carefully maintained ecosystem, right? As when they step in. But now the thing is, they also have all kinds of, like, potions and stuff made from different plants and animal parts, making an almost utopia because of like all of the things they have. They have long lives. They have like a lot of the things they need. They just grow. They have very like ready access to a lot of things, but it's not a perfect society. There is still crime. There is still corruption. There is still bad stuff that happens in Sylvan society, but it's the worst kind of, it kind of is almost worse because it's not crime built out of necessity, out of hunger, out of desperation, out of need, or out of like even ideology. It's crime built out of boredom, built out of just like malice, you know. Though also the one thing that I like that's kind of funny is that one of the mental images I had of this that's kind of funny is because the Sylvans can breathe through their wings, right? This image that they can hold their breath, air quotes, hold their breath underwater by having their like main body submerged, but having like the tips of their wings sticking out of the water. So then just like picturing, all right, you have fun, Elliot. It's been good having you. I hope you have a good night. It's good to see you. All right. But then, so just this image of like this, like, you know, elegant fairy just like deciding to go for a swim with just the tips of her wings poking up above the water. I don't know. I just find that image funny, right? I just find that image funny. Like, that's the snarkle. And then there is the Monsand, which comes from the term referring to mountains. And so these are like my stereotypical dwarves, except they're based on the Rakan from Dragalia Lost, which are essentially like what we would consider dwarves. Of they live in mountains, they live in mines, they do a lot of mining and build a lot of machinery and do a lot of blacksmithing, but instead of being tiny, and they have beards, but instead of being short, they're tall, they're giants. So I was like, let's run with that, right? So the idea here for like ideology, the Sylvans represent magic, right? A society built on magic. The Monsens represent technology and science. They were the second intelligent species to develop and form their own society and cities and stuff. They're also a long-lived race, but they're also a long-lived species, but not as long-lived as the Sylvans. But it's this thing where they mine for metals and stuff and precious gems and stuff. They dig the holes in the mines, right? And they live on the mountains. Well, the Sylvans discovered anima energy because they had so much of it, right? Because they lived in a forest that was teeming with life. They said they felt like because of all of the living things in the forest, it's almost like anima energy just flowed through the forest, right? And that was how they discovered it and discovered magic. Well, when you're underground, there's not as many living things. And in this setting, minerals and like stone and stuff doesn't naturally generate any anima. So they built their society without access. They built the basis of their society without access to anima energy. Well, at least not in a way that they understood. The Monsans started by like they were mining coal, and they were using coal to run their forges, and they were like doing like mining out caverns and stuff, and they were making they were blacksmithing all kinds of things in their forges, to build their society with all manner of different intricate devices and doodads, and a lot of coal-powered society. And because of their hardy nature, like they could deal with like the coal smoke and stuff. But at some point, their society realized there's only so much coal in the ground, right? And they're like, there's only so much coal in the ground, right? And eventually, as they expand and move to other mountains, as they get more people, they're going to run out of coal. So they're like, we need a solution, right? And so their solution was to hold a contest. And this is one thing that I thought would be really cool for Monsen culture, to be like, okay, what if they love contests? They love competitions. Not like they hate their enemies' competitions, but they'll jump at any competition, right? Any kind of chance to test themselves, they'll jump at. With no hard feelings, it's just a chance for them to prove themselves. And so they had a thing about like a competition from the Monsen society for a Monsen to develop a way to continue forging, empowering the forges without using as much coal. And so one of the Monsens, named Lazari, developed what she called forge powder, which was this special powder that if you coated, well, the powder was stable normally. It could be stored in bulk. It could be manufactured in bulk. It could be stored easily and safely for extended periods of time. And it could be transported easily. And it was completely inert unless it was lit on fire. And then if it was lit on fire, it would release massive amounts of heat energy, heat and light, and like heat up the air around it, right? It's essentially like based on gunpowder, right? And I based some of this design on the recipe for gunpowder in Monster Hunter, which is really funny. And the whole thing here is that she develops this forge powder that can be used. So then they use, when it's coated on the coal, it makes the coal burn longer, hotter, and brighter. So they can get the same amount of heat in their forges using vastly less coal over time, which lets them stretch their coal. And all of the ingredients for forge powder are renewable. You can grow it. And it's made using fire moss. They get a special moss called fire moss, which it's called fire moss because if you agitate it, it generates a lot of heat as kind of a mechanism to keep itself from being eaten. And they found it somewhere on the mountain. They can grow it. As long as it's left in a cool, dark, damp place, if you have some of it, it'll grow. And there's method or whatever that they use to grow it, and they mix that with a paste made of burst shrooms, which are these special types of mushrooms that, if handled roughly, will explode. Not like poof thing of spores, but like actual like release of force, like flashbang, like stun grenade kind of thing, right? Again, as a mechanism to keep from being eaten. And so it's difficult to handle these two ingredients because if you over jostle the fire moss, it's going to burn your hand. And if you are too rough with the burst shrooms, it's going to blow up in your face and you're going to have nothing to make the paste with, right? But if you carefully handle this and mix them together, and then you dry out the paint, you dry out what you make. Actually, did I make sure that I say that you have to dry it out? Oh. And so they use that, and some people are even experimenting with like having bricks or briquettes made of compressed forge powder, right? Where they're just using forge powder and not using any coal at all, and designing special forges to run on just forge powder briquettes. Excuse me. And they built lots of machines and devices to like run their society that ran on the coal and the forge powder and stuff, right? But then eventually, when they were at some point and somehow they came across the Sylvan people, and the Sylvan people were able to like trade, and so there's this thing kind of irks me a little bit. This like traditional thing of dwarves and elves hating each other, and that being some kind of like accepted form of fantasy racism. Not like, oh, dwarf saying, I hate elves, not racist, I just don't like them. And it's like that. That's literally what that means, right? And like, that just, it frustrates me, right? Like, I remember, this is kind of a sidetrack tangent, right? But I remember when like D&D was talking about, when WotC was talking about stuff for D&D 2024 and how they were adjusting some things in the world building to kind of step away from some racist roots and things of concepts and ideas that have become prevalent in D&D. And one of them was kind of walking a little bit back from the kind of accepted standardized fantasy racism. And the main way that people were noticing that was tieflings, which was that in the past, it was a thing that tieflings were always this like tragic group of people because they themselves had not been the ones that made the deals with the demons. They were not descendants of demons. They were descendants of someone else who made a deal with the demon, right? Or some kind of evil entity, demon, devil, whatever, right? But everybody treated them like they were demon spawn, and they were like, they were typecast, and they were like rejected, and they were just the stereotypical rejects, right? And that's why some people like really liked playing them, right? Was being able to have this kind of safe place to process those feelings of being rejected by society, right? Hello, country girl. But then when they were making D&D 2024, one of the things they talked about was that in like the thing for the basic blurb for lore of the tiefling, there was a bit at the end where it talked about how, whereas previously there had been a prejudice at large against tieflings because of the legends and stories of so many great heroes that had been tieflings, that had worked alongside others, alongside other heroes and warriors to save so many lives and to save the realms so many times. Society at large had come to accept tieflings. That's not to say that there was not going to be any racism that you're not going to find in some podunk little town in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to find some old fart that's still racist against tieflings, but just saying that like society at large had to come to accept them because and I think that was an interesting direction to take. And like, though, so much of the D&D community just lost their mind when that was like announced. I don't know if it was like more than half or if it was just a very vocal minority, but I saw one post where someone was like going off, and I'm just reading this and I'm like, please tell me this person is like shit posting. Like, what? They're like, Oh, you all are just being so woke. You're not even doing good storytelling. If you're taking away the racism, if people aren't fighting, if they're not having conflicts over racism, then what are they going to have conflicts over? There's no believable premise to have conflicts for storytelling if there's no racism, and it's mandatory for good story. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, what? It's like, what are they going to fight over? Ideals? Concepts? Faiths? And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. There's fighting for resources. There's fighting for so many other things, you know? And just because society at large has moved beyond some kind of prejudice doesn't mean you're not going to find pockets of prejudice in certain places, right? But yeah, whenever the argument about fantasy racism comes up, I really too often see get called up the whole thing from Tolkien with the distaste between the elves and the dwarves. But like, I feel like a lot of people miss that, like, a lot of the character arc there was Legolas and Gimli kind of getting over that. Like, it was more on Gimli's side than Legolas's side, but like coming to the side about, like, I could do that with, I never thought I'd die next to an elf. And he's like, what about a friend? He's like, yeah, I could do that. And coming to that moment where they accept each other as friends and kind of realize they have to set aside those like age-old prejudices, right? That was like the purpose of like getting to that point. So anyway, to get to my point of why I went on this tangent, since in this setting, right, the Sylvans or like the fairies are like my elf substitute, right? And the Monsens are like a combination of giants and dwarves and fill like the role of the dwarf substitutes in my setting. I wanted to turn this on its head and say it be a thing of, instead of there being a long-term rivalry or distrust, or like fantasy racism between the Monsens and the Sylvans, it'd be completely opposite direction, where there is a deep love for the deep love and appreciation for each other's cultures, right? Where there's this deep love and respect for each other's cultures, and that like when the Sylvans met with the Monsens, they were able to exchange things they learned. The Monsens were able to share some of their metalworking and their blacksmithing techniques and things with the Sylvans, and the Sylvans were able to teach the Monsens about anima energy and magic. And by using what they would learn, they discovered that the coal that they had been mining was actually the remains of ancient plants and animals that had been compressed and that had stored large amounts of anima energy that had been compressed into them over time. And that when they were burning the coal, a lot of that was releasing the anima energy into the fire form. And what the forge powder was doing was it was acting as an amplifier and amplifying the release of anima energy. So now they can farm and make forge powder, which can be used to amplify the power of spells. And with the knowledge of this mechanics of anima energy, taking that and applying their technical understanding and their mathematics and their science, they were able to better calculate more efficient formulations of forge powder, to be more efficient with less waste and to make more with less. And they were able to improve vastly. And they were able to study the Sylvan symbols for casting spells, and they developed their own system of runes because the runes were easier to carve into stone because they were more of straight lines instead of the curvy symbols, in order to create their own types of spells. And this kind of like improved their society, and it becomes a thing where they get these long-lasting trade agreements, right? The Sylvans provide for the Monsans like fruits and vegetables and things and meats and things from their forests, right? As well as different materials for crafting magic things and all manner of supplies and stuff from their forests, and knowledge and things they've learned about anima energy and about animation, about magic. And the Monsans are able to supply the Sylvans with very intricate metalwork, metal smith and crafted things, where like they're able to design special tools where like the Sylvans can say, we need a tool to do this thing. And the Monsans can be like, oh, okay, we're going to have our people sit down, look at this concept, look at the information you gave us, and we're going to design and make a thing that meets your needs. So they can make the tools and the specific equipment that the Sylvans need, like wands and stuff. And also this discovery that minerals can store anima energy and the forge powder can be used to amplify it, right? So using that, they can make special staffs and crystals and amplification focuses that can help the Sylvans cast more powerful spells. So then there's this long-standing trade agreement, right? But there's also something that I wanted the Monsans to have something that was very uniquely their own, right? And I was like, what if there is a thing that they can do with magic that other people can't do, right? Because there's always the legends of the dwarf smiths that can craft things no one else can do, right? Or the divine smiths, those mythological smiths that can have legends and that have legendary techniques passed down by generations, So it's like, okay, what if there's different runes that do different things, right? Instead of making a whole circle, they can have different runes that a rune can be an entire spell or piece of a spell, right? And one of the first runes that maybe the Monsans developed was what's called the breathing rune. And if the breathing rune is inscribed on a mineral, a rock, or like some kind of rock or crystal, stone, or like a metal, then that object will, air quotes, breathe, and breathing generates anima energy. So basically, as long as that object is exposed to a fresh source of either air or water, it will passively generate anima energy. But it is very slow, very inefficient. It is just going to be faster to get a bunch of flowers and use them as a sacrifice for a spell than waiting for a thing with the breathing rune to recharge, generally, unless you have an extremely well crafted device with a lot of efficiency things on it. But then putting even inscribing the breathing rune on something takes very expensive and special materials and tools, and it can be very dangerous. It is very dangerous. If you do something wrong, it can be dire consequences, right? So because it's so dangerous, because it requires such special materials, because it requires such special tools, it's a thing where everybody just agrees that this is a Monsan secret. No one else is going to try to learn how to make the breathing rune. If you want something inscribed with a breathing rune, you take it to the Monsans, right? You go to the Monsans if you want to get it. And that becomes essentially their patent, right? Their patented thing. And like the tools and the knowledge of how to that you would need to even know how to inscribe it can only be found in Oriansenshi City, right? And so that becomes like a key part of the of like some of the world building. So I had that, and this whole thing of they have these long-standing trade agreements, and they each bring something. The Monsans, produce from their forests. Okay. So that's how that works, right? Also, if you're watching the stream on YouTube, please like the stream. It helps the algorithm with getting it out to more people. Helps with getting more people to watch the stream and all of that jazz. If you're watching on YouTube, I got to get back in the habit of asking for that in the like early parts of the stream. It helps with so much. Now, this next part, okay. I will admit, there comes a part in a lot of stories, a lot of anime, a lot of manga, a lot of books, a lot of art in which you run into something that is literally the author's poorly disguised fetish, right? And like, you know, this is my story, so I get to put what I want in it, right? And well, I have not been secretive about the fact that I'm a scaly, which is a subgroup of furry. So I could not create a world at this point in my life without having some community of animal people in it. I could not create a story like this without some kind of animal people in it. So, hey, Crispy! So basically the concept here is that these are special animal species that have evolved to be able to walk upright and use their forepaws as hands. This allows them to manipulate tools, which help them grow and advance their civilizations. They use tools that meant they could amplify the force that they generate. As they developed, the other intelligent species were able to help them learn magic, and they were able to harness these in their own ways. Their brains are proportionally much larger than their unevolved cousins. Unevolved versions of the corresponding animals do still exist and live in the world. There are a variety of theories about why these groups evolved and the others didn't, but nobody knows for sure. These are the most prominent ones that have banded together and built their own societies, but there are other types of animal kin. They just don't. They just, like, you'll see, like, they'll just be seen here and there. So the main ones are, and I have put here, like, what I wanted them to look like for, like, imagery, right? Just so I have an idea of what I wanted to look. I based a lot of things on D&D images because I think there's just a lot of really good D&D art. So like the cow, bull, bison, kind of bovine. Animal kin of being like the minotaurs, rabbit, or like almost rodent-like, being the rabbit folk, even though rabbits aren't considered rodents anymore, you know, whatever. Sure, you know. I wouldn't be surprised, LeMay. Now, this is interesting. The pig and boar. So, I went through a lot of ideas about the pig and boar. Because at first, when I was planning this, right, I was going to go with more humanoid imagery, right? Where they were more humanoid. Like, you know, cat girls being like humans with like cat ears and tails, right? And I was planning for the pig boar's animal kin to be orcs, to be essentially like orcs, so, you know, the tusks and all of that, right? But then as I kind of started shaping more of this about like what I wanted for this imagery, I was like, let's go for more of an animal and lean into, because like, okay, in a lot of things I've seen these kind of like animal kin referred to as like demi-humans, right? Where they refer to like there's humans and then there's demi-humans, where it's like there's a raccoon girl, there's a cat girl, there's, you know, this, that, and the other, right? And that frustrates me a little bit because it feels like, I understand that there's the thing that because the intended viewing audience is human, that the default is treated as human and everything is defined based on their relation to humans, right? But I wanted to think about how these cultures would be defined in a world where humans are literally the new kids on the block. Humans are the latest intelligent species to rise up. So then the, air quotes, demi-humans would have had a name before humans arrived, right? So I was like, well, what would they be defined as? What if they're defined by their connection, by the fact that they're animal kin? They are, and then, so that got me the idea of like, what if we want for more animalistic imagery, right? And I was thinking a lot of like the lycanthropes in like hybrid form, where they look very much like essentially an anthropomorphic version of their animal, right? But like not a really cutesy thing, but like very much like a version of this animal. See, that's an actually interesting thing that I wanted to go with here, right, Crispy Synchron? Because the first intelligent species in this setting to be developed were the Sylvans, which are my like essentially elf equivalent, right? They're humanoids with they're humanoids with well, we call them humanoids, but they have the extended ears for the extended senses of an elf, and they have wings that they can use to fly. But they don't just fly with their wings, they can also breathe through their wings, which in this setting, the magical energy that powers all life and powers their magic is generated by breathing. So because the Sylvans can breathe so much so quickly because of their wings, they generate ridiculous amounts of energy, which is why they can live so long, right? And they were the first ones to develop magic. But there's like a rumor that because the Sylvans don't have fur, right? The Monsans are essentially giants that live in like mines and underground cities in mountains and stuff, right? But they're just so big proportionally that like they're just very much visibly distinct from the Sylvans. And the animal kin look like their animal, very much look like bipedal equivalents of their animals that they're related to. But the humans, and in this one, the humans are called adaptants. Because I get tired of everything always being called humans. And that refers to the fact that they adapt to all of... I'm working on some stories with it. I have some stories that I'm tinkering around with. I'll get to that in a little bit. I guess I wanted to share some of the world. But so I wanted the names to mean something. All of the names of the peoples to have a purpose, right? And so humans are called adaptants because they spread quickly. They adapt to multiple environments and multiple... Because like the Monsans live in the mountains, right? And in the underground and all that stuff. The Sylvans live in the forests. Well, Monsan comes from the Latin word for mountain. Sylvan comes from the Latin word for forest. So then they're named for where they live. The humans, the adaptants, spread everywhere. They live in any climate. They live in any kind of setting. They adapt. They develop things to adapt to it. But they're a little bit taller than your average Sylvan. They have skin colors similar to, they have a variety of skin tones similar to Sylvans. The only hair is on their head and some other like underarm and stuff, right? And like facial hair. But they don't have wings. And they don't have the extended ears. So there is a kind of a rumor going on that that's the thing. The Sylvans were there first, so you wouldn't call them demi-humans. There's a rumor in the world that the humans, the adaptants, are just some offshoot of the Sylvans that were like some mutation that were just born without wings and without the extended senses. And because they don't have wings, they don't generate as much anima energy, so they don't live as long. But that's not proof. They have no way to prove that because like it's kind of a thing where like humans developed in like kind of their own part of the world and were migrating and bumped into the Sylvans and the Monsans. I haven't really worked out a lot of the geography. I know I want it to be a very varied world with different environments and stuff. And I'm thinking like multiple continents. But it being a thing where the adaptants, well, they adapt and they're the like, because see, it really frustrates me when I see a lot of things being a lot of like fantasy settings being like the elves are this long-lived oldest race, right? And all this stuff, but then for some reason the humans are always the ones in charge and ruling everything, and the elves are always this dying race trope for some reason, or like being pushed out or something for some bizarre reason, right? And a lot of it comes from Tolkien, right? And what you have to remember when it comes to Tolkien fantasy is in the Lord of the Rings, in this Middle Earth, all of the specific species, like the intelligent species and peoples, aren't really, when you look at it from a storytelling perspective, I don't feel that they are really intended to be their own fully like fleshed out culture as much as they are a reflection of an aspect of human culture, right? The elves represent humanity's nobility, their ability to unite together, to live in harmony with each other and with nature. And part of the theme of the story is that nobility of the past is leaving, and that is being lost. And the future, the current and the future belongs to the flawed men of the now. So that's why the elves were leaving in the story, right? And that just became a trope of elves being a receding or some kind of like inferior, almost pushed out species compared to humans, even though they're always termed as being like the first. Right, because because a lot of times the stories are focused on the humans, because again, you were expecting a human reader, right? And there's this obsession with having characters that they expect the reader to identify with. It's why so many times, it's kind of like for Transformers, right? To go on a completely different thing here, for Transformers shows and Transformers comics and Transformers stories, a lot of especially the older ones, right? You would have a lot of times some group of humans being quirky sidekicks or kind of POV characters for a lot of these things, where the Transformers would have to explain these big concepts to these humans that didn't understand it, and they were the ones that they always played some key role or something in resolving so many of the issues that were happening in a lot of the earlier Transformers stories, because it was trying to have some kind of a character that the audience could identify with, right? Because they didn't know if the audience would identify with these anthropomorphic vehicles, with these humanoid robots. And it wasn't until later that we started to see more of the Transformers stuff. They started realizing that people really identify with these characters. They could add more personality to these characters, and they could have stories where they didn't need a quirky human sidekick. And that's why you see a lot of older movies when they started doing comic book or novel adaptations, like fantasy novel adaptations and stuff, or sci-fi novel adaptations, when they made them into movies, because they wanted to reach a wider audience, right? They would very often have the movie be some kind of an isekai, some kind of a thing where a character from the modern day gets pulled into into this fantasy world, or the fantasy world gets pulled, characters from the fantasy world get pulled into the modern day, right? And it somehow, instead of being about the fantasy world, becomes about the modern day characters dealing with the fantasy world, because they want to have a character that a wide variety of audiences can identify with and can use as the POV character. And that's just what happened for a lot of times, and we're kind of bringing that back. Like if you look at the Minecraft movie, or what they did with the later Jumanji movies, about just having normal people that we throw into these situations. I kind of went off on a tangent there, sorry, but yeah, but yeah, so in this setting, I wanted it to be that it is going to be primarily dealing with a human society, because there was one concept I liked of fantasy that I think could be explored a bit more, right? There's this concept of humans feeling the need to oh, that sounds interesting. Very often in fantasy stories, you'll see a thing where humans feel the need to have some kind of to define themselves as being better than everyone else in some way, right? Or to have someone to look down upon, right? Excuse me. And some kind of a thing about just because humans live a very short amount of time, there's this innate recklessness, this desire to do things quickly, right? To try to get things done quickly, and take these risks that other species wouldn't take because we live a fraction of the time, right? and what that leads to, and where that goes. And that's one thing I wanted to explore here, right? That human recklessness and what that does for the adaptants. I haven't done a whole lot of stuff for the animalkin. It's basically going to be the minotaur, rabbits for the rabbit folk. The pig boar animalkin are going to be looking like the wereboars, but in hybrid form. The felines, I was so tempted to go with cat girls, to go with the generic cat girls, but I was like, no, gotta go with Leonin. The very like animalistic ones, right? Canines going with like the werewolves in hybrid form. Lizards, oh my gosh, okay. I gotta say this. I was on the fence with the lizards when I was coming for like what I wanted for their imagery, right? Because, oh my goodness, do I like stories about dragon shifters, right? And dragon human hybrids, right? So I was like, yo, we gotta have I gotta have dragonkin. But then I was like, I don't know how I want to fit that, how I want to do that. So I had one theory, I had one draft I was working with, right? Where it was going to be a thing where dragons exist in this world, but they are not like the wise ancient dragons that we have in so much other fantasy. They're just really big, powerful, and relatively simple flying reptiles that breathe fire or that breathe some elements, right? And then, but because of how big they are, because of how big their lungs are, they can breathe in a lot of stuff. They generate lots of anima energy, and their bodies are infused with so much high concentrations of anima energy that like their body parts become sought after for making artifacts or making magic items or being used as sacrifices for different rituals because they just have such high concentrations of anima energy, right? But then having the dragonkin be an elevated form, the intelligent the intelligent ones, these that had become humanoid, and still have their wings, and they would learn magic and they would still have these very high concentrations of anima energy, but they'd be able to actually use it to do things, right? So that was my first draft of looking at it, right? But then I was like, okay, why would they get so much smaller, right? So I was like, okay, well, it could be a thing that because they could use tools, they didn't need to be as strong to survive. They didn't need to be as big and powerful to survive because they could use tools to amplify their force. So then that meant that they could form smaller and smaller bodies. They were getting higher and higher concentrations of protein, so their brains were developing to be bigger and so on and so forth, right? It's like, I could do that, right? But then I felt like having a animalkin that was like so much more powerful than the other animalkin, or like so much more magically inclined, just felt, I don't know, I might still do it, or like say that like there's like pockets of like animalkin and of like the dragonkin, and like the dragonkin and the lizardkin are like two different things. Actually, I like that. Now that I'm saying that out loud, I like that. But the lizards and the fish people are looking like the kotoas, and the birds are looking like the Aokakras. Let me do this. I'm gonna go. Okay, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if this is a thing, but have any of you heard of the Ice and Fire mod for Minecraft? I know it's based on the whole Game of Thrones setting, and I don't really know anything about the whole Game of Thrones and you know, whatever Song of Ice and Fire and whatnot. But in the Ice and Fire mod, there are 3 types of dragons. There are fire dragons, there are ice dragons, and there are lightning dragons. And they're active at different times of they're active, like their main like thing you have to remember about them is like when they're active. Fire dragons are active during the day. Ice dragons are active during the night, I believe. And lightning dragons, I think lightning dragons are like kind of random. But yeah, so I'll never, like, I love the Ice and Fire mod. It's one of my favorite mods for Minecraft. I think it adds so much to the world. And some of my best times in Minecraft were spent on that mod. I'll never forget, I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. I started playing in a single player world with the Ice and Fire mod, and I wandered far away from my starting spawn point to find a village and start building. And I remember I was building. No, I think the lightning dragons are active at night. And like I was hearing like blocks breaking. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, right? And I saw a thing about something being nearby, but I didn't see any threats. So I was in the middle of building my base. I had like a starter house built, and I was like building some farms and, you know, just standard doodads of a starting Minecraft world, single player Minecraft world. And then all of a sudden, a adult lightning dragon came out of the ground straight underneath my base. Well, it wasn't directly, it was like at an angle, but it came up from under the ground, under my base, destroying my base and all of my storage chests. And what I realized that happened is, for the Ice and Fire mod, in the settings, it says no dragon nests can spawn within a certain distance of the starting spawn of the world. I had wandered very far outside of that buffer, and some adult dragon nests will be underground, and a adult lightning dragon nest had spawned high enough underground that from where I was on the ground, I was within its threat detection range. And it burrowed up at me. But yeah, hold on, let me put this in there. Parts for different magical tools or sacrifices spells. But yes, also to answer the question about like, would the humans be demi furries in this world? I think I mentioned this before. I don't know if but essentially, some people consider the humans, the adaptants, to be demi Sylvans, or just really short Monsens. Actually, hold on. Let me not be silly. Hold on. If I'm basing a lot of this from Dragalia Lost, there are 5 elements in Dragalia Lost, so I should do the elements of Dragalia Lost. Let me, while I'm thinking about it, hold on. There we go. That's what I wanted. Here we go. Green. Wind is weak to flame, strong against water. Okay. No, you spell dissipate. Okay. Won't cause too much chaos. And Hey, no problem, Alice. I'm just kind of jotting down notes and ideas for a story idea or a world idea I'm working on. Um, ah. So this is the world of Vita, and basically it's a fantasy world. I might do some like futuristic stories set in the world too. I don't know. I'm still tinkering with it. Um, and populated by different peoples and creatures. The main thing of the world is that it everything is powered, like all life in this world is powered by something called anima energy, which is an energy that living beings make by breathing. It's not just breathing air, but like fish breathe through the water, and people and other things breathe through the air, but the act of breathing itself generates the anima energy, which powers the biological processes. And the peoples living in this world have learned how to manipulate the anima energy in order to shape it intentionally to create spells. So since it's anima energy, the spellcasters that use it are known as animators, because they will bring the breath of life to their ideas and their imagination and their spells. And the spells are called animations. And then there are two main types, 2D and 3D. 2D animations involves drawing a ritual circle onto a flat surface, which can feature a variety of symbols and shapes in a specific pattern outlining the intentions of the caster. And then a 3D animation is one where the caster uses a wand or some other kind of foci to draw out the symbols in the air around them in a 3D space. These can be more complex, but both of them can be automated. Not automated, can be well, I guess automated would be the right word, by engraving the symbols and patterns onto an object. Like if you have a flat surface that has a ritual circle with the stuff engraved into it, you could just supply the anima energy to it and it would just cast the spell. And with 3D animations, you could have like an orb or a wand or some 3D shape with the symbols and stuff engraved around it in that pattern, that if you then charge that thing with anima energy, it would then cast the spell. And then the thing is, all of the spells require anima energy, which can be pulled either from your body or from some kind of a sacrifice, which is normally either like burning some kind of plant matter or like killing and then killing some kind of an animal or living being in order to draw the anima energy from their body. Yeah, that's kind of the magic system here. And it's really funny because like I was working on this and kind of piecing things together, and it's really funny because like calling the spellcasters animators, right? And the source of their power is breathing. And I'm like, that's kind of funny because like when you look at animators in real life, they like normally you talk about like regenerating magical energy, be like you have to eat and sleep and yada yada. It's like when you look at animators in real life, they do not eat and sleep consistently enough for that to be a power source for magic. The number of stories I've heard of animators going through crunch, putting in long hours, and just like going through all of that grinding just to make deadlines and to make that magic happen. It just like, yeah. And yeah, kind of working on this world a little bit. But how was your day, Alice? How have you been? I haven't streamed in a while, so I haven't talked to you in a while. How have things been for you, Alice? Really, Nabiru? You're doing well? That's great. Ba, 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 ba. I'm looking up some stuff about the different afflictions from Dragalia Lost. I'm getting a lot of stuff from that, and I want to see if I can get some idea of like what I want to use for the Dark Dragon. I don't remember. Was it Curse? Why does this wiki not show me enemies that cause curse when they attack? Yeah, those are fun. Curses, poisons. I was thinking about poisons or some kind of like shadow. Yeah, Dragalia Lost was very important to me. It was, I don't know. It was a game I played a lot when I was in a really dark place in my life. And yeah. So Dragalia Lost, being a phone game, was a thing where when I was at really some of the deepest parts of my depression, and I was unable to get out of bed, completely consumed with my depression and spiraling badly, I could pull out my phone and do some missions on Dragalia Lost, or go play some story mode, play some stories, and get immersed in the world of Dragalia Lost. And it just helped pull me out of a lot of those dark places. I eventually, I don't say bored as much as like, as I started to get, I guess better would be the right word. I wasn't in those dark places as much, so I wasn't playing as often. And like, I still played when I wasn't in those places, but like when I wasn't in those depressive places, I was usually doing something else. Like I was usually doing something to make up for all the time I spent in those depressive places. I also played some other games on my phone, but Dragalia Lost, I said Dragalia Lost and Fire Emblem were some of the ones that I played the most. Not the Fire Emblem mobile game, but never mind. Not talking about what that game. Wow, it has been almost 3 hours. Holy cow, stream has been running. uh Um, okay, I'll do some kind of a curse. Curse and shadow blight. Some kind. Come on. Percentage. Okay. Okay. You have a friend who wants to get into games journalism. How do they not put the cart before the horse? So, that's a complicated thing. See, the thing that's complicated is that, like, being a gamer and being a journalist are not mutually exclusive, but they are two different skill sets. And I see a lot of, like, the complaints about games journalists being individuals that, while they may be good journalists, are not really skilled gamers or don't have their kind of thumb on the pulse of what's going on, or they're writing about things they don't know and understand. And I think it very much helps to, when it comes to writing articles and things about games and doing things about games, to do your research. So you don't end up putting your foot in your mouth. Like, I realized the other day that I've been putting my foot in my mouth with something I've been talking about for years because I found something wrong where someone lied on the internet and I believed it. But it's about doing your due diligence, doing your research, making sure you have information from multiple sources and aren't just quoting the company line. And you have some idea of, like, what the intentions of the developer are and how that factors into what the game community wants out of the game. Like, for instance, with Monster Hunter Wilds, right? There was a game journalist who did a review of it, And I didn't read the review because I don't really read a lot of games. I only read certain games journalism, and I don't want to get super invested in Wilds because I can't afford to get it right now, right? And one of the things for their headline was that one of the first things that they felt that they were going to install, one of the first mods that they hoped people made for Monster Hunter Wilds, was a monster HP bar. Something so you could see how much HP the monster has. And that is coming from someone who undoubtedly has experience with games like Elden Ring or Dark Souls or those kinds of games where when you're fighting a boss, you know how much there is a visual representation of how much HP. Those are very much gamified situations, right? Where you have your amount of HP, they have their amount of HP, and that is very blatantly obvious to you, right? But they got ridiculed because Monster Hunter works on an entirely different principle of it's designed to work within its own internal logic, and in some ways it's gamified, but in a lot of ways it's not, to kind of try to create this immersive situation, right? Where you are determining how injured the monster is based on how it's moving, right? Based on its tells, based on is it panting, is it drooling, is it limping, and these kind of tells. And like, do you see the skull icon flashing on your mini map, telling you that it is like low enough that you could capture it, right? And if it's not doing those things, you just keep hitting it, right? And that becomes one of the things where they were writing about something they didn't understand. And they didn't do their due diligence. They didn't do their research. So my suggestion, Alice, would be just tell your friend to make sure that they do their research. They do their research. And research through multiple sources. Don't get all your information from one source. And especially don't get all your information from the developer of the game. Because they will tell you whatever it takes to sell their game. Ugh. Okay. What time is it? It is after midnight. Well, looks like I'm not going grocery shopping this weekend. I texted a friend of mine to ask her if she could take me grocery shopping tomorrow. Well, not today. And she texted me back a little bit ago being like, yeah, sorry, I'm leaving for a conference. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, well, rip me. I'll live. All right. I gotta sit down and think about the purple dragons. I'm thinking. Hmm. This is kind of borrowing a little bit from D&D Black Dragons, but I think I'm okay with that. Hello, Chigon. I am jotting down notes and ideas I have for a fantasy world that I'm working on. The world is called Vita. I don't know if I'm gonna go Vita or Vita. I'm not sure. And the entire basis of the world is that all life on this world is driven by something called anima energy, which is an energy that all living things generate by breathing. They still have to obviously eat and drink and sleep and all of that stuff for like the standard bodily processes, but the core thing that keeps things running is this anima energy that they generate by breathing. And it's not just breathing air, it's like fish breathe, underwater. And so just like the act of breathing generates anima energy. And so the spellcasters in this world are called animators because they take that anima energy that's generated by breath and they harness it and they shape it intentionally and make it do things outside of its normal standard processes. They either pull anima energy from themselves, or they take anima energy from sacrifices they make as part of the casting of their spells, such as either destroying plant matter, or like flowers, or moss, or logs, or something, or by sacrificing some kind of an animal in order to absorb the anima energy from the creature. I haven't even really gotten to the story. I've just kind of been working on world building today. So there are three main peoples, intelligent peoples of the realm. The first, there's the humans that, they're called adaptans on this world, because they adapt, they adjust. Hello, Nevermore. Well, because anima energy is generated by breathing, it's a thing of like, how long can you hold your breath? You know, the kind of implication here is that like, oh yeah, it's good to see you, Nevermore. Yeah, I've been kind of going up and down. You know what I mean? The kind of implication here is that anima energy is kind of like a magical, fantastical representation, or not representation, or analog, or replacement, that's the word, for oxygen. It becomes like a replacement for oxygen. Because like oxygen, we breathe it in, and it helps with fueling so many of the things in our body. Like our blood cells take oxygen throughout our body to, a core part of life for all of our cells. And oxygen is like, even fish need the oxygen. They get it from from using their gills and stuff, right? And then oxygen, if you ignite it, fire needs oxygen, right? This idea of what if you took oxygen and you could manipulate it to do magic, essentially. Fire requires anima. And it becomes a thing like, for instance, burning coal, right? Because like, think about it, what are you burning to create fire, right? Because like, stone doesn't, like, you can get stone hot and it will eventually like melt or whatever, right? But like actual like a flame, you usually will need like something like coal or wood or branches, right? Things that would have anima energy because they're alive. Coal is literally pressed down remains of plants and animals from millions of years ago, right? So then this idea that it is the and the idea that it's the anima that was left in their bodies that has been pressed down into the coal, right? And there's different cultures that deal with it different ways, and the first ones to understand anima energy were the first intelligent species of this world, which were the Sylvans, which are kind of my analog for like elves, my like kind of replacement for elves in this world. And one of the things is that like the beings in this world are like are kind of named for where they settle. They have like a kind of environment or place that they traditionally live in and settle in, right? Sylvans come from the Latin word silva, which means forest. But that's why humans are adaptants, because humans will live in any environment. They spread quickly, and they will live in any kind of environment or temperature or climate. They will find a way to live in it. But yeah, the first ones were Sylvans, but so they're kind of fairies. So they are a little bit shorter than humans. And they live in the forests, and like the average adult Sylvan stands 4 to 5 feet tall, right? So they're a little bit, they're on the shorter side, but they also have wings. But I thought it'd be kind of cool if it's like, okay, if it's about breathing, right? And if the wings, they have the elongated ears, which help them with like hearing and detecting threats and things, which is kind of, elf ears, whatever. But I wanted the wings to be somehow connected to their ability to use magic, right? So I was like, what if they can breathe through their wings? Like they breathe through their mouth and nose, like air quotes normal, right? But they can also breathe through their wings. So because they can breathe in so much, they can breathe in and out so much through their normal breathing stuff and through their wings, they generate large quantities of anima energy, which is why they can live for so long, right? A-N-I-M-A. Anima is from the Latin word for breath of life. Sorry. I realized that, anima. I don't know if my speech to text thing, my captions is being weird, but so they were the first ones to discover it, right? And the Sylvans were the first ones to discover it because they had so much of it, and they can live for like up to 1,000 years. No, it's fine, Chikan. They can live for up to 1,000 years because they just have so much energy in their body that like fuels so much of their processes. And also, I thought it'd be really funny, just this mental image, because so many times when you see flying species, right, of like fairies or pixies or whatever, it's always like, oh, if they get wet, they're in trouble, right? And, their wings can't get wet. And I thought, what if I went the other way with it, right? Because they can breathe through their wings, what if it becomes a thing that they can swim and they can, air quotes, hold their breath underwater as long as at least part of their wings are sticking up above the water like a snorkel. They're breathing through their wings. So they're just like underwater, like looking at reefs or seaweed or sea plants or fishes, and you just see the little tips of their wings poking above the water, just moving around as they swim around. I just thought that was adorable and hilarious to just be like, you see a lake and you just see all these little, you just see like pairs of these little pokes of the tips of the wings sticking out the water, moving around. So they were the Sylvans were the first intelligent species, and they were the first ones to understand anima and to start understanding and codifying how to interact with magic. And I wanted to also take some of the things that we like. Very often elves are very much connected to or like attributed to in fiction, a lot of these themes and ideas and concepts that we would generally associate with like indigenous cultures, being stewards of nature and being very about sustainability and caring for the environment. Yes, Gyarados flying water has no wings. Yes, definitely Nabiru. So I wanted to build that into the Sylvans, but the way I built that into this world setting is that the Sylvans, while they do have villages, they do have like communities or whatnot, they don't have like dedicated air quotes farmland, right? They didn't like knock down a bunch of trees to make a big area for a wheat field, right? But what they've done is they've cultivated the forests that they live in certain places by making sure certain things were planted. You can't get your wings wet if you have none, exactly, Nabiru. Cultivating where certain things are planted, uprooting certain things, planting certain things, and just like making sure certain things grow in certain areas in such a way that they know that they can get certain things that they need for their community in certain areas of the forest. I got that idea because I remember reading this thing that was talking about how when the colonizers, the colonists, that's the word, came to North America, and they saw the Native Americans didn't have what they considered dedicated farmland, but when they went through the forests and the areas and the native areas of the place, it seemed to them, well, they didn't have what they considered to be dedicated farmland. It seemed to them like the place was just sprouting up with all of these like fruit-filled trees and all of these like edible plants were just growing everywhere. Like this place was just a paradise. And someone was talking about how like that's the thing about when you're so ingrained in the land, you've been taking care of the land in such a way that it doesn't look like farmland. It just looks like it's another part of the forest that happens to grow what you need. But the thing is, that was intentional. It was an intentionally cultivated forest. And that was the idea I had for the Sylvan's Forest, that it was an intentionally cultivated, very balanced thing that they made sure that certain things that they needed would grow in a good enough supply in certain regions of the forest so they would know where to go to get them. And they kept track of the different populations of animals and things that lived in their forests and were very careful about not overhunting anything. And if there was ever any aberration or diseases or things that were coming through that were being a danger to the populations of the forest, taking steps in order to deal with it, because they lived off the forest, so they made sure that they took care of the forest, right? And then the second intelligent species to form was to like form societies were the Monsans, which comes from the Latin word for mountain. So guess where they live? These are like my replacement for dwarves, except unlike dwarves, instead of being short, they're tall. They're very tall and very big. Their adults usually average between 7 to 10 feet tall. So they're very big. They have lots of facial hair, very bulky and strong, and very hardy. And they live in mined out underground caverns and mined out cities and things inside and underneath mountains. And like in okay, hold on, let me actually clarify that. I live in Now the Monsans, so whereas the Sylvans represent magic, the Monsans represent technology and science, because there's not as many living things so there's not as much things with anima energy down under the mountains, right? They're living on mushrooms and moss and whatever cave creatures they can find. So they built their society off of burning coal, which was anima energy, but they didn't know it to be that, right? And when they interacted with the Sylvans taught them about anima energy, and they showed the Sylvans their awesome smithing techniques. And with what they learned from the Sylvans, they were able to optimize a lot of the things they were doing and be able to do everything they were doing better. And it was a thing where I get very frustrated by the whole elves and dwarves like racism thing, where like they dislike each other, and it's like considered to be acceptable, air quotes, fantasy racism, where like people like, I don't like elves, I don't like knife ears, not racist, just don't like them. Like, well, that's literally like, and so I wanted to not have that be a thing. So I wanted to go in the opposite direction with this. And where like even though my dwarf analog have a thing where my dwarf analog and my elf analog not only don't dislike each other, but they very much value and appreciate each other's cultures, right? Where like the Monsans appreciate that the Sylvans taught them about anima and how to optimize things they were doing and supply them with fruits and vegetables and other goods from the forest that they don't have access to, being under their mountains, right? And the Sylvans appreciate that the Monsans can make them very precision tools and very well designed and capable equipment and beautiful jewelry and things made with the precious gems and the metals that the Monsans can dig out and smelt, and the different alloys, and they just appreciate each other's cultures. And there's long-standing trade agreements between their different cultures and their different cities and kingdoms. Yes. Now that's not to say that like everything's hunky-dory, and that's one thing I want to get through in this world, is that like none of their civilizations are perfect. None of their civilizations are a complete utopia with no crime and no bad people, right? There's going to be bad people in every community. There are going to be greedy, destructive people in every community. And so while at large these two communities value and care about each other, there are still going to be individuals in each community that distrust the other community or distrust their friends, or like there's going to be extremists. But like I want to emphasize for this world that they are a minority that is rejected by the majority. And that also comes with like some of my writing and my story building and my world building kind of comes down to some of my ways of processing some of my own fears about current events as well as the future. And that's just kind of that of like understanding no matter what future we get to, there are always going to be troublemakers. And the dream is to get to a point where troublemakers exist, yes, because you can't just like unalive people because you disagree with them, but they're not put in a position where they're able to cause problems for everybody else. They are openly rejected by society at large. And yes, because there's got to be conflict, right? And so the humans are called adaptants because they go wherever. They expand. They build in any climate and environment. They stick in anywhere, right? So they adapt. That comes from the Latin word for adaptation, which didn't change too much, but yeah. And the thing is, they live much shorter lives than the Sylvans or the Monsans. Like, Sylvans can live up to 1,000 years, but usually only live between 800 to 900 years. The Monsans can live up to 700 years, but usually only live about 500 years, right? The adaptants only live like up to like 90 to 150 years. So, the adaptants have this kind of urgency to them where they take a lot of risks that the other species wouldn't take. And because of that, while they have faced setbacks, they have been able to turn those into advantages and to kind of leapfrog forward, even though they're the newest intelligent species to pop up, right? They have caught up very, very quickly because they have not taken the slow and steady route. They have not taken the safe development to understanding magic and technology that the other species did. And it's not just these three, because there's also the ones that I'm writing lore for right now are working on the animal kin. And this kind of comes down to some of my own personal preferences, right? Because it's my story, right? And, it's my world. And then talking about this, there's the thing about like, well, you see it in a lot of stories where there is some element or concept that can be very crudely described as the author's poorly disguised fetish. And, well, I'm not very secretive about the fact that I'm a scaly, which is a subdivision of being a furry. And so there's got to be animal people. And I went back and forth with some of the visualizations of what I wanted for the animal people, for the animal kin. And at first I was going to have them be very anime-esque, like cat girl kind of stuff, about where it's a very human person with cat ears. But then I was thinking about this thing where, like, you see in a lot of fantasy media when they have animal kin or other kinds of fantasies, especially since a lot of the stories are very human-centric, the general name applied to them is demi-human, right? They're defined by the fact that they are human plus something else, right? They are human plus something else. And I was like, in this world, right? The animal kin predate the adaptants, right? So, what if I went into, what would they be called? They wouldn't be called demi-adaptants because adaptants didn't exist. So I was like, what if they were defined by their relation to their animals? So I went with animal kin, so then I decided to go with some more animalistic imagery, right? Like minotaurs for like the cows and the bulls and the bisons, the D&D rabbit folk for the rabbits, and for the pig bears doing like the werebore but in hybrid form, right? And that kind of stuff. And the idea here with the animal kin is that they're not like some interbreed between species or something. They are an offshoot of a type of animal, where they are a group of some type of animal that evolved in such a way that they are walking on 2 feet and using their front legs as hands in order to manipulate tools. And because they can manipulate tools, they can oh, no problem, Chicon. It's like going on 1 a.m. here myself, so I'm getting ready to wind down myself. It was great having you. I want you to know that I think that I'm grateful to have you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Always know that this world is better for having you in it, and that if no one else believes in you, I believe in you. All right, so have a good night, Chicon. But actually, I'm getting hungry, so I think I'm going to wind down myself. It is coming up on 3.5 hours. It's 3 hours and 22 minutes since the stream started. I think that's pretty good for first stream in a while. I'm going to kind of wind down, get some food, maybe play some games maybe later. I don't know. I might go to bed. I don't know. I'm doing a lot of writing, doing a lot of stuff. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chicon. Let me get to just chatting. I need to get to bed myself. Jeez, goodness gravy. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming. It's good to have everybody back. It's good to have people back. It's good to be back. You know, had people here and it was fun. Had a blast. And it was great to see everybody. And I want you all to know that I love all of you and I believe in each and every one of you. And I think that you all are precious treasures of human beings. And this world is a better place for having you in it. Always know that you are special. And remember the Star Hunter motto: shoot for the stars, have wonderful adventures, live your dreams, and always stop to enjoy the memes. You wave, your thumbs up. Good night, everybody.